Tennessee has proven after the whistles were blowing, as we expected, in the SEC and NCAA tournament first weekend, Tennessee has done well. Last I checked, they're 5-0 in those tournament games. How big is it that Tennessee has proven as a defensive team that they can win in a tightly officiated game?
This is a huge deal because Tennessee, we knew, was not necessarily built for a tightly officiated game because of the way they embrace contact. And I know that's a little bit odd to say, but with the way March Madness is called, this is why defensive teams oftentimes struggle in March Madness, is because the minute you embrace contact, they will call the foul, and they will do that in the SEC tournament. And Tennessee made it to the SEC tournament title game, in which all 3 games they played, they and the team they played had more fouls called than their yearly average was on them. All 3 games. So 3 tightly officiated games. Now, yes, they lost to Florida, but they beat Texas A&M and Auburn playing that, or not Texas A&M, excuse me, Texas and Auburn playing that style of play. I wrote last week that this could prepare them for March Madness, and boy, it has. Against UCLA in the first half of that game, the refs had a tight whistle. I mean, they had an extremely tight whistle. And I thought for a while that could cause problems for Tennessee into the second half. I was actually texting my brother about it at the time. And then Rick Barnes turned up the tempo. And this is what we talked about earlier. The minute he turned up the tempo, the minute he started forcing those turnovers, the minute UCLA wasn't ready.
And by tempo, the way they weren't necessarily running more as far as offensively, but the way you turned the tempo up, I thought was 3-quarter press, right?
Yeah, it was a 3-quarter press. And it did 2 things. That
was my favorite defense on NBA Live, just for the go ahead.
It did 2 things. It got Tennessee, it threw a new look at UCLA, but it also got UCLA in foul trouble because the rest were still calling those tight whistles, but Tennessee wasn't getting the calls against them. UCLA was getting the calls against them because UCLA was still stuck in a half-court game. So Mick Cronin, in the post game, people said he was complaining about the refs. I didn't think he was complaining about the refs. I mean, Tennessee would say the same thing if they had lost. Mick Cronin said, you know, we had our 2 best guards getting foul trouble in the first half, so it really messed us up what we had to do. He's right. That's true. Now, Tennessee, what they did is what got those guards in foul trouble. I don't blame Mick Cronin for saying that. I mean, you would say, you know, anybody would say the same thing. If their 2 best guards got in foul trouble in the first half, they would say that's why they had trouble winning the game. And
no, and let's be fair. I don't have it in front of me, Caleb. You probably do. The number of fouls called, it's not like it was one-sided. I haven't heard that contention out of anybody with the Bruins.
No, nobody at UCLA said that. Tennessee shot 16 free throws. UCLA shot 14 free throws. So now there were 19 fouls called on UCLA, and 14 on Tennessee. But truth be told, because of the tempo Tennessee ran, I'm not even going to say UCLA fouled that many more times, but this is where the versatility steps in for Tennessee. Refs who call a tight whistle, like you talked about earlier, Dave, and we both did, they don't catch it as much on a press on a trap or a press at half court. They catch it when you're banging under the basket.
Well, and I've mentioned this before. I've been an official. At some point, you don't want to call every single thing. So if you come out with a mindset that you're going to play hard and physical, and I might have a couple of quick calls on you, generally what happens is that team adjusts their style of play, or the official says, man, I'm calling all these. And it's subconscious, Caleb. It really is totally subconscious. You just feel like you're calling too many fouls. So either that happens, or you have a foul-filled game, or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and sometimes you do just have a foul-filled game. You're right. And the biggest problem is when you play
Teddy Valentine, TV Teddy, who he's called, you're not going to change the way he calls a game. I don't know if he's retired now or not, but he's going to call it the way he calls it.
Okay. Yeah. So what we're talking about is, and you also, and the reason I bring up the press and the flow, you talk about not wanting to take over a game. It's one thing to call a foul underneath the basket when a team's running a half-court offense and they're banging under the basket, right? You can call that.
Yes.
It's a lot harder to call a foul when a team's playing fast-paced because you don't really want to be the ref that breaks up the flow of the game, right? When it's going up tempo, because then you are the story.
That's true. Is there any Unsung has a point here. I don't get how the ball handler can slam into the defender and create contact, and the defense gets a foul. I see that a lot. I will tell you that's an incredibly hard call to make.
It is. It is. It's
An offensive foul, especially on the perimeter, which is what I'm envisioning.
I agree. And it's even harder because the rules on when to call what on that are not exactly clear, because no one's actually even in the NBA has made a clear point on how to do it.
Unsung, I think refs enjoy controlling the tempo. I completely agree. So, Caleb, do you think that is a factor with Tennessee, or have they overcome that to your?
They don't want to control the tempo of a fast-paced game. They don't. They hate doing that. They get embarrassed doing that. They like to control the tempo when it's a grinded out slugfest underneath the basket where they see a chance for them to become stars. They don't have the guts, most of them, to change the tempo of a game that's up tempo. They don't. And it's also just when you're, I mean, it's the same with anything, Dave. What do refs do? A play happens on offense. The other team gets the ball. They're immediately getting back to the other side of the court so they can see what's going on inside the paint, right?
Yes.
So if you're running a full court press, they got to readjust to go out to catch that. So I think that was what was so crucial about Rick Barnes' adjustment. But the more important thing is, and this is a huge part with Tennessee, and this is an underrated part, and we're not talking about this enough. One of the reasons Tennessee is equipped to win tightly whistle games, while they create contact a lot on defense, they draw contact a lot too. And this team shoots its free throws well. I mean, Zakai and Charles Lanier are not going to miss clutch free throws. And I think this is one of the most underrated parts of Tennessee basketball this year. They shoot 74.4% from the free throw line as a team, which collectively is top 100. And their best players, I mean, Charles Lanier is 74%, but he's actually getting better. Zakai Ziegler and Jordan Gainey are both 81% from the foul line. Igor Milicic is a big. He's 73%. Felix Opera, a center, is 71% from the free throw line, and that's actually skewed because he was below 50% for the first half of the season. And Jemai Mashak is 76.3%. Every single so Tennessee's top 6 rotational players are all above 71% from the free throw line. That's a huge advantage if you're in a game that embraces contact. You're going to have a big advantage when it gets close.
Let me ask you this. Better coaching move. Heupel running 2 tight ends, as he did in September last year. Barnes going 3-quarter press. Vote on it on our poll question. It is up now. I'll give you the results. Which was a better coaching move?
I have to say Heupel going 2 tight ends, because I don't think Heupel had that in his repertoire before the start of the season.
Yeah, he didn't. And in his DNA and his preferences, and insert any word you would like to, right?
Yeah.
That to me was flying in the face of what you would ever expect from him in so many different ways. I'm going with Barnes in the 3-quarter press, though, because I think he did so during, I know he did so during an elimination game. So that to me was really impressive, to be able to go outside of your comfort zone. That was the word I was looking for earlier. Heupel was way outside of his comfort zone. Maybe Rick Barnes wasn't as far outside of his comfort zone, but he did so in a championship moment, did so in an elimination game. So I would go with Barnes. Right now, everybody agrees with me, as is usually the case. About 90%.
Agree with me last time.
Yeah, whatever. 90% say Barnes going 3-quarter press is bigger, Caleb. So I'll give you this opportunity to defend yourself.
Heupel's was bigger. Again, Barnes, this team last year ran 3-quarter press at certain times. Barnes was able to turn up the tempo. Heupel went 12 personnel. Yes, he had to. He was forced to, but that doesn't mean he would have done it. A lot of coaches in his situation wouldn't have done it, and would have just stuck to their system. No, Butch Jones would not have done it. That's very true.
He would have absolutely gone to the dance with the girl he brought to the dance. There's no question. He would not have changed. Did he change anything philosophically to a great extent during his career? I can't remember.
Not really. No. And
Dylan says Heupel went 2 tight ends out of necessity because our tackles were garbage.
But that's a testament to Heupel to do that. Rick Barnes always knew he had this up his sleeve if he needed to use it, because he had players that ran it last year. So I think it was a brilliant move. And to call it in that moment in the middle of an elimination game. And by the way, he called it. Here was the most impressive part about it, Dave. He had to think of that within 2 days of scouting UCLA, because the only reason he called that is because UCLA showed something in their first round win that they had not showed to that point. So he had 2 days to think this through, and he put it out. I give him all the credit in the world for that. But I don't think Heupel planned to go 12 personnel until probably a week before the start of the season, when he realized it may have actually been in the season when he first
I
realized.
think it was probably in the season.
Yeah, so Heupel had to figure that out in the season. And for those who don't know, I'm sorry, it's a lot harder to install a new football formation in a week than it is a new basketball play in a week. It just is. It just is. There's so many more moving parts that you have to do to install that.
Well, hold on now. That's not just a play. You have to have a team that's solid fundamentally, or they're going to foul out of the game really quickly if you go 3-quarter press and you haven't been running it.
Yes, but you have 4 players. We have 4 seniors and 2 guys on your team that did this last year, and they were the heart of that press. They knew what they were doing. Barnes probably just told them, guys, we got to go back to this, what we did last year. We're going to throw this in at UCLA right when it matters most. And then Felix Opera knows how to guard, come up to the perimeter because of the system he ran at Ohio State. So then he just basically told Felix, he's like, look, rather than playing defense under the paint, I need you to deny the pass to the paint. That's not hard. You just tell the center, move up to the 3-point line and don't let them throw the ball underneath. So.
Okay, so should Rick Barnes have done this more?
No, I think it was the perfect time. I can't say he should have done this more. I mean, he got Tennessee as a number 2 seed, and they're fresh for the NCAA tournament. I think Rick Barnes has done a masterful job to this point. That was the perfect time to do it.
I also don't think he could have done it earlier, Caleb. I don't. I think that this basketball team was winning at a high level. He couldn't have pulled that out because maybe you drop a game because they're not equipped to run that. But the other factor is they don't go as deep, Caleb. I mean, I think this team, if it plays any sort of press, even if it's a half-court press, is probably going to be pretty fatigued at the end of the games.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I mean, Barnes adjusts to his personnel, and I agree. And thirdly, most of the like we talked about, he spends more time on X's and O's now because of Jemai Mashak and Zakai Ziegler as the leaders. But the one thing he did work on this year, and you can tell, he was working with Chaz Lanier developing his defense all year, trying to get him better defensively. Sure. And I don't think Chaz Lanier was ever in a position until right now to be able to like have Barnes switch to this press and him do what he needs to do.
Our Bank on It brought to you by Commercial Bank, member FDIC. Rick Barnes' 3-quarter press is why Tennessee is in the Sweet 16.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life.
A guy with a lot of jobs, but this one is the most important.
This is not government work. As such, I treat it with care and attention.
Until someone else calls. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
A couple of comments on my thoughts. Bank on It brought to you by Commercial Bank. David says Barnes did it in season adjustment at the end of the season. That's harder because it's sudden death game. I agree with that. Caleb says you got to win the SEC tournament at any cost. So he's
what?
Yes. Derek says our team's success is built on good shooting and solid half-court defense. Switching to a press too much might affect shooting in the backcourt. I'll agree with that. You don't want to have dead legs because Tennessee doesn't have the depth to be able to do that. I think there was a reason that Tennessee ran that 3-quarter press too on the second game of the weekend, Caleb. Not that they needed it in game number 1, but you think to yourself, hey, you win this game and you've got some rest. And I think this team is incredibly well conditioned as well.
That's true. And also, they didn't do it that long. They did it the final 5 minutes of the first half, first 5 minutes of the second half until they had complete control of the game. And UCLA wasn't really ready for it. So I agree. It was a wrinkle. It was the perfect time to throw that wrinkle. And it's a wrinkle to just make sure you take control of this game and call it a day. And I think that the big story is this wasn't the first time, though. I guess the real big story is that that was a wrinkle that allowed them to not be in trouble with the tightly officiated game.
Yep.
But what we're seeing is that Tennessee has we thought it was a disadvantage. They have an advantage in tightly officiated games because they shoot their free throws. The reason Barnes did this with UCLA is because UCLA can shoot free throws too.
No, I agree with that. I also think that you have to factor this in. Being a lot of these key players are what, 4th, 5th year guys?
Mm-hmm.
You know the fundamentals. So I guess I'm recalling your point a second ago where you can do this in basketball easier than you can do it in football. You probably can. But you can probably do it with a senior laden team a lot easier and not worry about them getting a ton of fouls called against them in the 3-quarter press.
Oh, 100%. You can definitely do it with a team that
their hands out. They're not inside the body. I mean, you can watch how they play. Have we done this day in Tennessee sports history?
No, we have not.
Why don't you just tell me to hit the button?
Hit the button, Dave.
This day in Tennessee sports history.
It's cool, baby. It's cool.
Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb, what do we got? Yesterday was Peyton Manning's birthday. Maybe today's T. Martin's birthday? He comes right after.
Are you calling it Peyton Manning Day?
No, just a week.
just a week?
Yes, just an entire week of the Sheriff. By the way, the Sheriff is the worst nickname that any sports figure has ever received. I don't know where that came from, but it is absolutely horrible. It doesn't describe him whatsoever. I don't understand why the Sheriff stuck. When that first came out, I thought, this isn't going to stick. It's going to be gone in 2 weeks. But sure enough, here we are, the year of our Lord 2025, and Peyton Manning's still called the Sheriff by some. I have no idea.
Someone has some real beef.
I don't know why I have such a beef with that nickname, but I do. I don't know why, but it just rubs me the wrong way. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What is wrong with
Dave?
Okay, so on this day in Tennessee sports history, the Lady Vols beat Marist in the Sweet 16 in 2007 to go to what was their 6th straight Elite 8. Now, here's why that's significant. That, at the time, tied a school record for most consecutive trips to the Elite 8 in Pat Summitt's era. However, to that point, in that 6 straight year run to the Elite 8, Dave, they still hadn't won a national title in any of these 6 years because in their first 3 years of doing it, a Final Four and 2 runner-ups, they kept getting eliminated by Diana Taurasi and UConn. Then they choked a game against Baylor in the Final Four. Then they lost in the Elite 8 to North Carolina the year before that. So, but this time was the 6th time was a charm. They beat Marist to reach the Elite 8 and then end up winning the national title. And then the next year, they reached their 7th straight Elite 8, which remains the most consecutive Elite 8s they ever made it in the Pat Summitt era.
Okay. Interesting. I like that. Tennessee, by the way, when on the men's side, I heard this stat and I guess I knew it, but you said it today as well. We're talking about Tennessee basketball that I felt like if they made a run to the Sweet 16 was like Duke making a run to the Final Four or a championship. How many consecutive Sweet 16s is this, Caleb?
This is 3 straight. The first time Tennessee's ever made 3 straight.
That's bizarre. That's Duke, North Carolina stuff back in the day.
Oh, it is. 3 straight Sweet 16 appearances. The first time Tennessee's ever done that. The second time Rick Barnes has ever done that. I mean, they are it's just absolutely incredible what they've been able to do. And I mean, if they can make 2 straight Elite 8s, look, I'm just going to say this. Zakai Ziegler, if Tennessee beats Kentucky on Saturday or Friday, there is not a Tennessee player that will have had a team accomplishment ever that Zakai Ziegler didn't have at Tennessee. The only thing he's missing is a 30-win season.